Hello everyone! I am Alice of KHR Arts and Cloud Orchid Publishing, and today I wanted to give y'all a book review of one of my favorite books, Geisha, A Life by Mineko Iwasaki. This book is actually the true story behind the book that I'm sure all of y'all know, Memoirs of a Geisha. This particular book is really important because Mineko is the geisha that Memoirs of a Geisha is based on. So I was right there with y'all when Memoirs of a Geisha came out because I am absolutely a Japanophile. I love Japan. I love the culture, the history, just everything about it. I love it. I've loved it since I was a little kid and I was watching Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z when I would walk home from elementary school. I just loved all of that. And so, of course, when Memoirs of a Geisha came out, I read the book and I watched the movie like everybody else did, and I thought it was awesome. And that really sparked me to start seeking out more books like that. Now, you may be asking, if I liked Japanese culture and all that so much, why didn't I seek out that literature before? And well, the problem was there really wasn't any. And I've talked about that in some of my other videos about how, like for instance, in junior high, I read the entire fantasy section in my school library. And I read several other sections of the library too. And the fact that they only had like 4 books about ancient Egypt, like, period, that's kind of how it's been until recent years, where we've just had this amazing explosion of different books about different cultures. And then on top of it, indie authors writing about their own experiences or about experiences that interest them. So we're getting all these new perspectives and we're getting so many more books about so many more subjects that for the longest time were not really considered mainstream New York Times bestseller, popular, whatever. So as much as Memoirs of a Geisha is a problematic story, it helped open the door for a lot more of these types of books to become more popular, and more specifically, books that are a better representation of Japanese culture and history. So Memoirs of a Geisha came out, and the book was actually based on Mineko. And she's a real life geisha. She's a real person. This is her memoir. And so the author of Memoirs of a Geisha actually went to Japan, and he actually interviewed the geisha in the Miyako district, which we know as modern day Kyoto. And in particular, he interviewed Mineko and asked them about their life experiences and about, what it's like in the Hanamachi, what it's like becoming a geisha, just everything about that. And this part makes me really sad, y'all, because it's something that Japanese people still have to fight against to this day. And I just feel like it really speaks to a lot of larger issues that we just don't have time to get into in this video because it's a very big, complex subject. But the short answer is that we just still have problems in this day and age with other cultures being fetishized, is really what it boils down to, and it sucks. And a lot of it is based on misinformation and just mysticism that white people created around these peoples and these cultures. And so one of the biggest things that y'all need to know about these 2 books is that geisha are not courtesans. And for those of y'all that don't know what that word means, it means prostitutes. Those are 2 completely separate things. And for the history of that occupation, geisha and courtesans, or better known as oiran and taiyu, they had very different skill sets. They lived in completely different areas, like that. They are not the same thing at all. Their responsibilities are completely different. So when you think of a geisha, what a geisha's responsibility is to be a living piece of art. They are an artist. On top of that, they are also a diplomat of sorts. So their job was both to be entertaining, but also to be informed. And that was the biggest thing that I learned about reading this book, is what geisha actually do. And when you find out what they actually do, it's really amazing. And just the high expectations that are put on these ladies are just mind-boggling. Just all of the different stuff that they need to excel in order to do their job is crazy. The fact that they need to be good at dancing and music and singing and art, and the fact that they need to be up on current events and politics, and that they need to keep in mind like all of their regular customers and stuff. They need to know like their birthdays and their anniversaries and other important dates, and they need to know all this like important information about them so that they can create this completely curated experience. And that's what it is. It's an experience. And I actually went overseas and got to experience a geisha party for myself, and they're magnificent, y'all. It was a treat. It was a life event for me. And basically what it is it's this like fantasy world that they create for these people, largely way back in the day, like noblemen and merchants and important people, and nowadays businessmen. Women also would employ geisha for kind of different reasons, but largely so that they had this space that they could go to with their friends and they could relax and have a fun time. And what that specifically entailed was watching the geisha do a dance, listening to them do a song, whether singing it or playing it on an instrument, having a conversation with them, talking to them about current events, talking to them about politics, talking to them about the stuff going on with their business. All of that kind of stuff. That's what geisha do, is they like create this experience for people to get away from their daily problems, to be able to have somebody that they can hang out with and create this really fun experience for them. And here in the West, we don't really have anything that's comparable to that. But the best that I can really kind of give y'all is when you like go to the club or you go to the theater or, you know, some other entertainment venue like that. You have people that are there that are meant to like entertain you, and you go there to be a part of this like fantastical experience that's so outside of your daily life to have a fun time. But there's literally zero expectation. I mean, unless you're a creepazoid, of that you're going to have any sort of like personal contact with the people that are there to entertain you. It's kind of like that. But again, we don't really have a good equivalent for that here in the West, unfortunately. I mean, I wish we did because it's amazing. It's amazing. I experienced it for myself and it was amazing, y'all. So beautiful, so much fun. And so Geisha A Life literally details Mineko's life. And it starts with her as a young girl, like about 6 years old, living with her family, living with her parents and her siblings. And they are a poor noble family. And so they have a title, but they don't really have like money. So unfortunately, they resort to selling their daughters to the Hanamachi to become geisha. And Mineko, it becomes her turn to be sold to the Hanamachi to become a geisha. And I know that sounds bad. I know that sounds bad, selling people. It's not a good thing. However, part of why there was this transaction involved with this process is because essentially the Hanamachi is adopting this person. And at the time that, you know, ideally they're a child. They want to start as like early as possible. I think the ideal age used to be about 6 years old was when they wanted to start the process. And that's because they want to give compensation to the family to, you know, give them incentive to give them their kid. But the Hanamachi assumes like all like of the responsibility that the parents would have. So they give housing and food and just all of the stuff. Like they are their parents now, essentially. And so they gave up their children to the Hanamachi. And Mineko did have interactions with her other siblings, and they were not good. And I really feel like that's where the Hatsumomo character in Memoirs of a Geisha comes from, is that one of her siblings was really mean and horrible. To be fair, part of that was because she was sold to the Hanamachi when she was a bit older, and she didn't want to become a geisha, and she blamed her parents, and so she was really vengeful and angry at her parents. And she then also became very vengeful and angry at Mineko because her sister was not a very successful geisha. Like, she was not very well liked, she was not very popular, so, you know, she wasn't getting the best gigs. It was kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy thing, that she was just having a really bad time, y'all. And I felt bad for her. Like, as horrible as she was, I also felt bad for her because it wasn't her fault. I mean, what she chose to do with her circumstances was her fault, but the circumstances themselves were not her fault. And she was mean to Mineko because Mineko was seen as very special by this one Okiya and One-san in particular. And she was adopted when she was about 6 years old, and she was groomed to be the Atatori. And what that means is the heir to the Okiya. So she was going to eventually inherit the Okiya. And that's a big deal, y'all. Basically, that's kind of like the equivalent of being the daughter of the CEO. And that you're on this track where then you are going to eventually take over as CEO. That's the best comparison I have for what this is. So the sister especially hated that she was basically just handed a silver platter that here, your life is going to be awesome. Just boom, right off the bat. Now, I do want to note, that doesn't mean that this was going to be easy for her. That doesn't mean that she had like a free ride. Oh no, that meant more was expected of her. That meant she had to work even harder than the other geisha because she was going to be Atatori. There was stuff that she had to learn that they wouldn't have to learn. And not only that, she carried the reputation of the Okiya on her shoulders directly. So that meant she absolutely could not mess up. And as she progresses, because the reason why they want them so young, they don't start off being a geisha at 6 years old. That's crazy. That's not how it works. They start off as being a maid. And what that means is that they just live at the Okiya and they do some basic like chores and stuff, like household chores. And they learn by being immersed in the environment and also by going to geisha school, where they go there to learn the dances and the songs and all the other stuff about being a geisha. And being in this household surrounded by people who are at different levels of the process is part of the learning experience. So they're there with other maids and with Maiko and with geisha, and then of course with the owner of the Okiya and any other of the retired women that also still live at the Okiya. And that's another big part of this too, is that while yes, there were some bad things about being a geisha, and I'm not going to sugarcoat any of this, be like, oh, it's magical, whatever. It had its own problematic stuff. But a big part of what made being a geisha special, especially in like earlier times in Japan, was this was one of the few opportunities that women had to be independent. And not only that, they had the ability to be independent without having to worry about what was going to happen to them when they got old. And a big part of that had to do with that you had to be useful in order to earn your rice bowl, was literally the idea, was that everybody has to pull their weight because food is not exactly a thing that's guaranteed and stuff. And so that's why stuff like that would happen. And the women were more likely to be kicked out than the men, because once you couldn't have kids anymore, and once you couldn't really like help with household chores and whatever else it was that they did anymore, they're kind of like, why are you here? So the fact that they would have security in their old age when they're seen as useless was enormous. And this does take place in a more modern era. This takes place in like the 1950s, 1960s, that whole era. So it's a much more modern era. So stuff like that was not happening anymore. However, there was still that mindset of that as a woman, you still needed to worry about what was going to happen to you in your old age, who was going to take care of you. And largely, if you were not a part of one of these very few independent occupations, you had to get married and you became a part of your husband's family, and you had to basically hope that they would take care of you once you got old. But so the fact that being a geisha was one of the few assurances you had that you would have a home and you would have a bowl of rice when you were old was top notch. That was top tier. That was all right. We're in business. Excellent. And on top of that, let's not gloss over the fact that being a geisha meant you could be independent, that you could earn your own money and make your own decisions. I mean, to a certain extent, but far more independence than you would have having a husband and being under the control of your husband's family. Yeah, it was pretty good compared to that. So the fact that she was afforded that, and on top of it, going to be on this track to be an Atatori, which meant that she would have even more independence owning the Okiya, was, wow, huge. And so just going through this journey, and not only that, knowing that this is a real person, y'all, this isn't a made up person, this is a person's memoir, is just wow. And just all of the hard work that she went through, because she had to jump through a lot of hoops to make it to each next level, y'all. She could be turned away. In fact, if I remember correctly, one of her sisters did get turned away. They were like, you're not cut out to be a geisha. Bye. That can happen to you, where if you're not pulling your weight or you're not succeeding, like at the end of the day, they're a financial investment, and it is a huge financial investment to be a geisha. The whole like adopting a kid thing, not so much. That's like pennies compared to what comes after that. But debuting a Meiko, which means an apprentice geisha, costs like hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's crazy. And I talk about all of this in my own novel, Geisha Hands. And a big part of what inspired Geisha Hands is actually Geisha a Life, is that I really wanted to help dispel a lot of the problematic stuff that was written in Memoirs of a Geisha, and to bring more awareness and education to working as a geisha and that whole process of going from a Meiko to a geisha and everything that took and stuff. I talk a lot about that in Geisha Hands. That was a big goal for that book, was to further that education of what being a geisha actually is. And so, yeah, having to buy all of the expensive kimono and all of the accoutrement that goes with that, and then just all of the other stuff that goes into the debut, that you are tied to an older sister, which is an experienced geisha, who then kind of, it's an apprenticeship. It's you learn directly from the geisha herself and become ingratiated with her clients, who will later become your clients probably, and also having connections with the tea houses that she has connections with and that your Okiya has connections with, and just all of that is money. There's a lot of money exchanged between these different businesses, and then also all of the money that's spent thanking the community for doing their part to help debut this Meiko. So all the shopkeepers and other artisans and stuff that are a part of this whole process, which I also talk about in Geisha Hands. And that whole same thing also happens with if they get to the level where they go from being a Meiko to a geisha, which is a very important ceremony called Arike. It's called the turning of the collar. And that's the biggest thing. That's the most problematic thing in this book, is Arike means turning of the collar. Meiko wear red collars on their kimono so that you can just from a glance identify whether or not they're a Meiko or a geisha, as well as the Meiko, as their career progresses, the collar will have more gold embroidery on it. Geisha has a white collar. And so that's an important distinction in their rank. And so the turning of the collar literally means that they will start wearing a white collar on their kimono instead of the red collar. They'll also wear a different style of kimono, where the Meiko wear a long sleeve kimono where they have the dangling sleeves that reach all the way to their knees, and they wear the dangling kimono obi, the tie in the back. It looks like butterfly wings hanging down, whereas a full geisha will wear the short sleeve kimono, so it only hangs down I think a foot from their elbow, and then they wear the drum knot style obi in the back. It's very neat and tidy. And then on top of it, geisha don't have to get their hair done anymore with all the wax and stuff. They can just wear a wig instead that's permanently styled, whereas Meiko have to go through the whole process of getting their hair waxed, and at different stages of their apprenticeship, so that again what rank they are, they wear different hairstyles. And there's also different hairstyles for different festivals and times of year and all that. It's a whole thing, and I talk about it in my book. But the turning of the collar ceremony is the biggest problem in this book, because first of all, they never say the word Arike in this book, because that's not what they're referring to. They say Mizuage. What Mizuage is the coming of age ceremony for a courtesan. This is the biggest problematic thing with Memoirs of a Geisha, that Mineko, in her book, directly talks about how pissed she is that the author put that in the book. And not only that, the fact that the entire Hanamachi, when that book came out, they were pissed, y'all. There was a big uproar in Japan when Memoirs of a Geisha came out. The fact that they trusted that author and revealed so many secrets, and yes, secrets, about how the geisha world works. And he basically was like, oh yeah, geisha are courtesans. Perpetuated this lie. Is disgusting. So what is Mizuage? Mizuage is when a courtesan goes from being a trainee to being a full courtesan. And this is a trigger warning for y'all if y'all want to skip ahead from this, because it gets gross. Okay, if you're still here. Mizuage, a trainee. It's the same sort of thing with apprenticeship. They learn from their oiran all of the tricks of the trade, which I will let your mind fill in the blanks. And yeah, it's probably what you're thinking. Tricks of the trade. But they don't actually physically do them. They just watch their oiran do those things, which, oh my god, gross. Problematic. And they in private, kind of learn how to do those things and all that. And yeah, it's just as problematic as you're thinking it probably is. And Mizuage is when the apprentice girl gets her virginity auctioned off. And the reason for this really problematic practice is because of the nature of the trade, is that they're trying to have like a built-in clientele for when she transitions to be an actual courtesan and actually servicing clients. That essentially the idea is that the person who wins this honor is going to be like her patron client, the one that's going to be seeing her the most regularly and giving her presents and all that stuff. And it's exactly what it sounds like. And it's awful. And they have it happen in Memoirs of a Geisha. This auction is what they say is what Maiko do to become full geisha. And that's a lie. That's not how that works. And so I will say that is a part of the book and the movie that was really problematic for me. And this was before I read this and knew about this. And also, of course, the whole scene with the Baron. I have to fast forward through that part every time. I can't. It's so triggering for me and makes me so upset. I can't do it. But yeah, just the misogyny and the problematic lies of Memoirs of a Geisha with that just is very dangerous, honestly, because it just perpetuates this misconception that Western cultures have about geisha, and it's very upsetting. So when I read that in Geisha A Life, I was just shocked and disgusted, and I just felt so bad. And that was honestly what part of what inspired me to write Geisha Hands is I'm like, who let this happen? Who allowed this? And the fact that there are still people today who think that that's accurate is upsetting. And so that's part of why I wrote this book is, let's get more books out there on the market to, essentially outweigh what was put in this book. And also just reading about Mineko herself, beyond her being a geisha, just her as a person. She is a firecracker, y'all, okay? And that's not a term that I like to use a lot in describing people because I feel like it's the most overused white person description for a personality ever. Is so many white women will be like, she's a firecracker, I don't want to be that white lady, but for real, if anybody deserves that title, it's Mineko. She just absolutely is just on her own mission, and she is such a hard worker that and this is not a spoiler or anything, y'all, but it is a part of the later part of the book. She works so hard that she almost goes into kidney failure. Yeah. That is how hard she worked. She worked herself into the ground to the point where she almost went into kidney failure. That she was eating so little and drinking so little and sleeping so little and just taking on so much work that she almost put herself into kidney failure. That's the kind of person she was. And that she was just such a big advocate for the community. She was huge into the whole community support of the independence of women. And a big thing that really resonated with me with her book was that she was very upset. And this is a thing still to this day. This is just part of how the culture works, is that in order to perform anything, whether it's sing a song or play a song on your instrument or do a dance, one, you have to be enrolled in the geisha school. And geisha and Maiko and maids are enrolled in the geisha school until the day they retire. They go there every day until they retire. 2, they have to receive certain certification. So in order to do different levels of different performances and songs and stuff, you actually have to get certification from the people at the school to say, yes, you're allowed to do that. And that's, by and large, the reason for that is so that people who do these performances, whether it's with private clients or doing them at a festival or something, that they're doing them correctly, that they're of the level of skill to be able to publicly do these performances, which I completely understand, wanting to have control control over these traditional performances and stuff and make sure people are doing them right. As a giant history nerd, I 100% understand this, but the minute you are no longer a geisha, so whether you quit or you retire or whatever, you are not allowed to do them ever again. Like, the idea is not even, like in your house by yourself with the shades drawn. Never again. Done. You are never allowed to play another song again. You are never allowed to sing another song again. You are never allowed to do another dance again. All of the official geisha dances and songs you learned, done. Never again. And Mineko was like, excuse me, I'm not allowed to participate in any of these art forms ever again once I'm done being a geisha, or if I choose to stop being a geisha? What? And so she petitioned hard to the geisha school, and there's like this board of talent and stuff with like the Japanese government and stuff, to petition that people who are not geisha, who prove themselves to be qualified to do this stuff, should be allowed to do this stuff. And unfortunately, she lost that battle. So there is tribute that I pay in Geisha Hands, in that I do bend the rules of the culture just a smidge in honor of Mineko. It's my little tribute for her and her fight, that we pretend that she won that battle and that you do get to still do your stuff. So it's my little tribute to her in that book, because that just resonated with me so much that it's like, I'm sorry, I have to stop doing the thing that I love doing. Like, I can't even imagine if me as an author one day woke up and they're like, yep, you're not allowed to write stories anymore. I'd be like, excuse me, what? No. And that's basically the answer she had. So it's very sad that she lost that fight. She just goes on so many adventures that like have nothing to do with being a geisha, and she like has some romances that are like super spicy, y'all. Like, this is not a spicy book, just FYI. There's no like spicy scenes in it or anything. I'm talking about her personality, that she gets real spicy with her men. I'm just like, oh, okay, girl, you get it. All right. Like, she knows what she wants. But yeah, it's such a fun read, and it really gives you an accurate view of what being a geisha is. Because I mean, I don't know how much more authentic you can get from an actual memoir from an actual geisha. And this is also partially what inspired me to put pictures in Geisha Hands. There's pictures in the books, y'all. Full color photographs of her and like other geisha and stuff. So like, if you're a person that loves pictures, like, this is the book for you, because it's got pictures in it. And I didn't even know when I picked it up off the bookshelf it had pictures in it. And then when I flipped it open and saw the pictures, I was like, oh my God, bonus content. I love me some pictures in a book, y'all. So yeah, I so recommend Geisha A Life. It is a wonderful book. It is super educational. Mineko is just such a character. Oh my God, she's just so much fun to read about her experiences. And yeah, there are some tough parts of the book due to the nature of being a geisha and all that. So, warning on that. Just, there's going to be some hard parts to get through, but I highly recommend it. And I hope y'all enjoy this book too. So I hope y'all liked this video. If you did, please be sure to give it a like. And if you're new, subscribe. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.